Yes.
Sorry to wake you, Senator. It's about Origin.
What happened?
There was an uprising. F.E.A.R has taken command of the prototypes.
My God.
We can still resolve this discreetly, but we have to move fast.
Oh, all right. Let me make a few calls.
F.E.A.R, or First Encounter Assault Recon, was released on Xbox 360 on October 31st, 2006, and then on the PlayStation 3 on April 24th, 2007. The PC version was released before either console versions on October 18th, 2005. F.E.A.R was developed by Monolith Productions, which after F.E.A.R is known for Condemned, F.E.A.R 2, Gotham City Imposters, and even Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor. F.E.A.R was published by Sierra Entertainment, whose history of developing and publishing dates way back to 1980. Some of Sierra's more notable games include King's Quest, Leisure Suit Larry, Half-Life 2, and several Spyro and Crash Bandicoot games. F.E.A.R is a first-person shooter with horror elements. The following review is based on the PlayStation 3 version and was recorded using an Elgato, which records at 60 frames per second, and I do need to mention that because frame rate is something I will discuss later. Also, this game is technically 10 years old and has recently passed my 10-year rule. After 10 years, I feel comfortable spoiling games, movies, or books. The game is technically older than 10 years if you count its other versions. That being said, if you feel like F.E.A.R is something you feel like you'd want to try, or you just don't want to be spoiled, this is your warning. F.E.A.R begins within the confines of Armacam Technology Corporation HQ, where a man named Paxton Fattel takes control of an army of replicas. Replicas are clones and super soldiers. With the help of the replicas, Fattel kills everyone. The United States then sends Delta and F.E.A.R teams to go after Paxton Fattel. You are an unnamed soldier that is part of the First Encounter Assault Recon Team, also known as F.E.A.R. As you explore the dark hallways of ATC HQ, you're forced to fight against replicas, ATC security, while also experiencing horrific hallucinations induced by a mysterious little girl in red. The worst part? You're all alone. Alrighty, so let's get down into the nitty gritty. First of all, I'm not gonna lie, I had difficulty understanding this story. So rather than discuss the story first, I'm going to take a random right turn here. The audio of this game is awful. It's just downright terrible. Most of this game's narrative is delivered to your earpiece. And we've all seen this in literally any first-person shooter game ever. Your commanding officer tends to communicate with you via your earpiece or radio. I mean, hey, soldier, get down to the playground. We have intel to suggest the enemy's hiding underneath the slide. You know, stuff like that. You know, it's right in your ear. Problem is that in this game, your commanding officer or leader or whatever this guy is, he can't ever be heard.
Subject being in an induced coma. Those ATC security folks killed Bishop because somebody didn't want this getting out. They aren't just worried about some ethically questionable bioengineering experiments. I think they're covering up some pretty nasty shit.
His audio, for some reason, is just extremely low, and the mixing is terrible because my footsteps, sound effects, or music will almost always drown him out. There are a handful of times where I can hear him, but it is not a good thing being able to hear him once for every 10 times he speaks to you. The game also offers little sound clips you can collect. They're not actually collectibles, but they're also not technically audio logs. Throughout the game, there will be phones that are just flashing red, and if you go up to them and just turn them on, you'll hear the last message that was sent. So, essentially, they're just phone messages you can listen to. There are also laptop, again, they're not really collectibles because no one's ever counting, but if you activate these laptops, your commanding officer will hack them and then give you a piece of information regarding the narrative, you know, some background information.
You have one new message.
Mike, what the hell's going on over there? It sounded like an explosion. I can't get through to anybody. Call me back.
End of message.
But this is both of these, the phone messages and the laptop information. This is all just as bad when your commanding officer's talking to you. Unless you're standing completely still in a quiet environment, you can't hear it. The worst part is that there were actually interesting messages, but the only ones I ever heard were pointless. For example, a lot of the phone messages that I was able to hear were just like, "Hey, Mark, what's going on? Call me back." That's it. Now, it's very rare that you run into an ally, but when you do, guess what? The audio is bad there too. While it's not anywhere near as inaudible as the constant radio communication or the phone messages, it's just as poorly mixed. Again, unless you're standing still, you won't hear them. Now, the music, it can be a little bit bipolar. More often than not, the game's music is very sly, very haunting. It's very on the down low. You won't notice the music unless you're listening for it because you're so busy with the visuals. It's not in your face like most horror music, It's not like dun 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 dun, something like that. However, the other side to that is that there's this little campy music that comes on, and it doesn't make any sense to be in the game. Usually only comes on when you encounter a certain character, but it's almost like the music itself is the comedic relief, and it's poorly timed comedic relief.
You said you're an engineer? Can you help me get into the network?
What am I, an IS lackey? Tell you what, you disable the local security system, and I'll see what I can do about the server.
I can disable it remotely once I'm logged in.
No, you can't. It's on a separate network. Oh, perfect. You again. See this button? I wonder what this does. Oopsie. Bye-bye now.
The sound of the guns is decent for its time. Sometimes it becomes unsynchronized, so you will hear gunshots seconds before you fire, and sometimes seconds after you stop firing. The game's best audio moments come from the ambiance. When those little creaking noises or the glasses crashing to the floor or screaming are combined with brilliant just art direction overall in the visuals, that's when you see the true soul of F.E.A.R. When it comes to visuals, the game is outdated. That being said, the environments are just boring and dull. They don't encourage exploration. Rewards like health upgrades and slow-mo ability upgrades encourage exploration, but if this game didn't have those upgrades, you wouldn't explore this surprisingly massive game. You spend a lot of time in a giant office building. The office building is your run-of-the-mill office building. However, the paranormal aspect of this game transforms this boring office building into something a lot more sinister. A hallway is a hallway. I mean, who cares? All of a sudden, all the lights go out, and that hallway becomes a dread to run through. As your character hallucinates and enemies are around the corner, along with this haunted-ass building, the game's boring office space becomes a haunted maze. Sometimes you'll end up in a room that just doesn't make sense and the game doesn't even bother to explain it. In this game's case, it's a good thing because it adds to the confusion. Sometimes you'll walk into a room where somehow there's just a skeleton hanging on the wall, a small pool of blood on the floor, and then just the ceiling just drenched in blood. Rather than just blatantly tell you this is what happened. It does it. You're just left to think, holy shit, what happened here? And you have to move on because you got no choice. And as you're moving on, you hope that you're not about to encounter something more than just an armed enemy. There were a number of times where I walked into a room and just went, oh shit, and then I was careful about heading into the next room. And just when I started to forget that feeling and started just, charging through the rooms, I'd get another reminder with another room of brutality. And if you don't get a room of brutality, you'll get a hallucination induced by the little girl in red, Alma. Because the audio was so bad, I couldn't tell what was being said, but surprisingly that added to the fear factor of those moments. Alright, just gonna run to this door here, and then you hear whispers and all of a sudden the door disappears and you're face to face with this terrifying little girl, and then you're in a room that's on fire. That's when I just went, alright, I don't know what the fuck was just told to me, but I am confused and I am scared. As for technical problems, the game suffered a lot of frame rate drops and screen tearing. Now, the reason I mentioned the Elgato at the beginning is because they record in 60 frames per second, so what you're seeing in the recording doesn't exactly match up with the game experience. The frame rate drops would happen during a firefight, sometimes which it would make aiming almost impossible. When that frame rate dropped as you were shooting, you'd have to just pray and spray. So while the overall visual tone and audio ambiance made this game a pleasure, a lot of the time its errors really negatively impacted the overall experience. If this is a first-person shooter, I should be able to enjoy, the shooting. But with those frame rate drops and screen tearing, it almost made it impossible sometimes. Alright, so for the story itself, I find it difficult to have an opinion, simply because most of the time I didn't know what was going on. For me, it was like 10 long levels of just looking for Paxton Patel, and then after I got him, there was a little girl. Everything that was happening in between went in one ear and then out the other. Not even 1 year, since I couldn't even hear anything. There are laptops, like I said, you can hack throughout the game that will give you more background, but unless you're in a very quiet environment, best of luck to you. Looking at the Wikipedia page, I just played the game and I still had to go and what the hell just happened? I learned that I missed out so much because of the audio problems. I learned that the little girl's name is Alma. I didn't even know that playing the game. That it's hinted throughout that she's your mother. Paxton Patel is being controlled by Alma, but Patel may also be Alma's son. All those little details were in the game, and the audio part of the game compromised that for me. I could have enjoyed the game so much more had it not been for the faulty audio. For one, the controls are difficult to get used to simply because I guess it came before the standards that most first-person shooters adhere to. However, that comes down more to user error than it does, from the game. Also, sometimes there is an input lag in where you have to press to shoot, and there's like a half second to a full second of nothing before you actually shoot. This is most evident with the submachine gun, and it's something I really can't show on screen, unfortunately. The overall gameplay, though, is what you'd expect in a first-person shooter. There is a small element of survival horror in that, at least on the normal difficulty, ammo can become pretty scarce. I feel like if you're careful, though, more often than not, you won't have a problem. However, if you get screwed over by the frame rate during a firefight and have no choice but to empty entire clips on one enemy, there's always new guns to pick up from the bodies. The catch is that they won't always have a lot of ammo on them. The guns are limited, but that's just what it was like back then. Pistol, shotgun, assault rifle, submachine gun, and then a few other weapons that are really special, like one that just disintegrates your enemies. The downfall to those powerful weapons is that ammo is extremely limited. So like that weapon that turns your enemies into a skeleton, you can only have 20 rounds. The game also features a health bar and an armor bar. Armor reduces the amount of health you lose when you get attacked, and health does not regenerate unless it's at a certain point when it's low. But it might as well be non-existent. If your health is at 8, it'll regenerate to 10. It makes no difference at that point. In the normal difficulty, health kits were plentiful with a few exceptions where I would simply get careless. But otherwise, it was easy to move throughout the game with your health at a comfortable spot. Armor is less plentiful, but it does exist and it does help. As you explore the world of F.E.A.R, you can pick up upgrades which simply permanently increase your health by 5 or increases your slow motion ability, basically. Your slow motion ability is essentially the first person version of Max Payne's bullet time. You turn on slow motion and you can see where bullets are going, and you can use it to focus on enemies at a time. Unlike your health though, your slow motion ability regenerates on its own when it's not being used. Your enemies have pretty decent AI. They're not totally stupid because they do move and they do communicate with each other, but sometimes they just stand there and become easy targets. When they do communicate, sometimes it's hilarious because I feel like the communication is randomized. For example, during a firefight, one yelled out, "You see anything?" And another one just went, "Shut the fuck up." And I couldn't tell if that really was a response to that question, or it just happened to be well timed. Other enemies include robots, and these enemies are the worst. They don't add variety as much as they just make me just groan. Like, this guy. There's only 2 types of human enemies, and there are only 2 types of robot enemies. The first one is this RoboCop prototype that continuously fires rockets at you, and the second is just a drone that shoots lasers at you. Neither are fun to fight, and if you're not careful, both drain your health dramatically. It's insane how much they hurt you. Now, I did read that the artificial intelligence in the game, the AI, was probably top of the class back then, but in 2017, it is what it is, and that is outdated. The game also doesn't have any death scenes. When you die, it just immediately takes you to the loading screen. Sometimes it's just so abrupt, you might even laugh to yourself and go, what just happened? What the hell? Also, random note, but F.E.A.R's loading screens are long. Oh my god, they are long. But if they are longer than Prey's, they don't feel like Prey's loading screens. I haven't actually counted, but when I was waiting for the game to load, it never felt anywhere near as long as Prey. All in all, the game's ambiance is still fantastic. Those hallucinations and those feelings of dread, walking through these haunted levels, they still hold up. However, the game is just betrayed by bad audio, bad frame rates, and just outdated gameplay. Now, I've never played this game prior to this review. I've never even really heard of it. I mean, I was a wee lad, this tiny kid when this game came out. Only game I ever heard about was F.E.A.R 3, and that's because the commercials for it played everywhere on TV at the time. I remember seeing it, being interested, and then I was going wait, that's the third one? The hell? And then moving on because it was the third in the series, and I was a dumbass kid. Obviously, as an adult, Yakuza 4 got me into the Yakuza series, Battlefield 3 got me into the Battlefield series, Call of Duty 4 got me into the Call of Duty series, and a whole bunch of other examples. So anyways, I had a random urge, inspired by literally nothing, to want to play this series. Unfortunately, as cheap as this game is, it is rare in my area. Lucky for me, my best friend bought it for me as a gift while he was out and about, along with F.E.A.R 2. Anyways, the game is pretty decent, but it is a shame that its technical aspects brought down what still feels great about this game. At this point, if you strip the game of everything and just made it into a walking simulator, I think the game would still feel as scary as it was with the gunplay. So my recommendation is that if you own an Xbox 360 or a PlayStation 3 and like first-person shooters, you should maybe try F.E.A.R, especially at what it costs right now. It'll take some getting used to, but it really shows a whole new perspective to the genre. However, I don't think this game is worth buying a console over, nor would I say it's a necessity to play. And despite the low score I'm giving it, I firmly believe that if this game was remade for today's consoles, it would be amazing. If you gave it the Modern Warfare remastered treatment and maybe updated the controls a little bit, it would probably still be as butt-clenching as the original. So for me, F.E.A.R. First Encounter Assault Recon gets a 4 out of 10.
What's the first thing? You will be a god among men.